Hey everyone, I'm Rin from Rindar Gaming, and today we're going to go over 8 things to help you start crushing those Mythic Plus keys. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that sub button for more tank tip videos. So the first thing we're going to talk about is don't be afraid. Alright, mistakes are going to happen in every key you run. Whether they're small mistakes or large mistakes, it doesn't matter. But know that mistakes will happen. Don't get flustered by them. Just look to the next pull. Start thinking about your next rotation and how you're going to approach that next pack. Don't let the mistakes define you. Okay, that's the very first thing I want to say. You're going to mess up, and it's okay. Even the rough pulls are going to teach you something. Every time you come into a scenario where something trucks you, something accidentally gets pulled, there's a bad line of sight, a fear goes off, everything is going to teach us something. The best thing you could do would be to try to find a way to grind with friends, right? Try to find a team of friends, guildmates, or people on WoW Progress or Raider.io to help you learn and grow in those scenarios. That's going to give you a little more comfortable atmosphere, so when those mistakes do happen, you don't have to worry about some pug rolling out and leaving. And you guys can kind of learn and grow together. You can talk over some of those things. So that's tip number 1. Don't be afraid. Mistakes will happen. Tip number 2 is going to be learn what you can. The dungeon journal can be used for more than just checking what loot drops off of a boss. As you're going through that dungeon journal, you're going to be able to find mechanics for almost every single boss in the instance. All right, you're going to want to learn, what's going to really hurt you, what kind of movements you're going to make, how are certain things going to affect certain bosses with certain fixes, stuff like that. So you just want to constantly be trying to learn, and the dungeon journal is a great way to start with that. Another good way of learning, watch other tank streamers and ask questions. Twitch is full of people that are tanking Mythic Plus dungeons on a regular basis, and they generally do not mind if you jump in there and learn everything you can from them. Ask them questions. Why'd you pull that there? Why did you taunt that ad and pull it back here? Why was that ad CC'd when you just pulled the rest of them? You pulled everything on that pack beforehand. Jump in there, ask questions. You can also look on sites like Wowhead and in class Discords for tips and recommendations that way. There's a lot of great articles from people like Fat Boss, some of the method guys on there on different ways to pull, or other MDI guys. A lot of the MDI guys are starting to actually put small guides and pull paths on sites like Wowhead now. So don't be afraid to jump into those and take a look as well. Okay, so tip number 3 is going to be download add-ons and weak auras that can help you out. There's some really good add-ons out there, and we're going to talk about just a few of them really quick that can kind of get you started. So the first one's going to be downloading a good boss mod, right? So you're looking at Bigwigs, DBM, something to that effect. You can find them on the Twitch desktop app or wherever you download your add-ons from. Make sure you've got some kind of boss mod, some kind of timer to tell you, oh, there's an interrupt coming, this cast is coming, etc., okay? That should be kind of a basic thing. The next one is going to be Method Dungeon Tools. What this add-on does, and kudos to the dude that wrote it, what this add-on does is it maps out the entire dungeon for you and allows you to look at a map of the dungeon with every ad on it, with the ones that pat. You can jump to what those ads do from that point. You can also set up pull paths that will map out your percentages for you. So you don't have to actually go in there and run those keys to figure out how exactly to make your percentage. You can actually just use this Method Dungeon Tools add-on and go in there and be like, all right, I want to pull these 2 packs here first, this pack second, these 3 packs third. That'll put us at the boss. And you can go through every single dungeon that way. You can save them. And if the rest of your team has this add-on, you can push your pull pass to them as well. So that way, they'll have a pretty good idea of what you're actually going to be pulling so they can start making their plans as well. It's a really good add-on. The next one's going to be Weak Auras, okay? Weak Auras is a very useful tool. There's some really cool weak auras out there, like an interrupt tracker to show whose interrupts on cooldown, because as the tank, you should be kind of willing to step up and put yourself in a position where you may be making some of those interrupt call-outs or making some of those weird calls on the fly. So you want to have weak auras with a good interrupt tracker, and, there's other stuff as well, such as like having your cooldowns, your resources, things like that, a little closer to your character so you don't have as much eye travel during the dungeon, because you want to be able to get as much information into your brain at a glance as possible. And a lot of that can be done through weak ores. If you're ever watching a streamer or something like that, you'll notice that they got those big, really cool, flashy bars right next to their characters and everything's kind of sitting center. Those are almost always done through weak auras. So pick up this add-on, go to websites like Wagyu and find a kit that works for you. It's really easy to set up, very, very easy to set up. Most of those are already pre-built. You just copy the little string, paste it in there, and go. And it will immediately help your play. The last one I want to bring up is a tool called Opie. Again, you can find it on the Twitch desktop app. And that's going to allow you to make really, really quick marks on bosses. So once you get installed, you're going to have to play with it a little bit. You got to keybind it, but it'll basically allow you to just tap a button to mark an enemy. And then you can be like, hit skull. And rather than you going in and hitting the little drop down and picking the enemy you want and clicking a little button, it's one keystroke and they're marked and you're moving. And that's going to help you keep the dungeons moving a little more fluidly. It also allows you to, like, for me, I use caret to mark, and then I used shift caret to drop ground markers. So if I'm like, all right, back to blue, whatever, it's shift caret and I click, wherever I click, I'm dropping a ground marker as well. So add-ons like this, little things that are just going to help you out and make your run go just that much smoother. You want to be looking around for good weak ores, good boss mods. You want to look at method dungeon tools, and you need Opie. In my opinion, it's one of the best add-ons I have, and I get asked about it a lot on stream. So tip number 4 is kind of redundant compared to what we talked about, but I want to go over it anyway because this is hugely, hugely important, right? Tip number 4 is know your pulls. Before you walk into that instance, walk into that dungeon, yeah, man, I'll tank that 10 for you. Spend some time in that Mythic Dungeon Tools add-on. Spend some time in the Dungeon Journal and know what you're going to pull. Have your path already set up in mind and be figuring out what the timing should look like. Well, okay, I can pull this pack to this pack to this pack, basically without a break, and then cooldown should be back up and I can pull a big. Have an idea how exactly you want to walk through that dungeon and where you're going to go. Don't be the guy who gets through the second boss and you're like, oh, shoot, do I go left or right here? Should I pull that pack? I just don't know. What does that one do exactly? Know what you're doing. Walk in there and have some confidence about you because you know you did your research and you've got a good idea where you're going to go and what you're going to do with it. All right. Also, know where you can pull big and time cooldowns. Most tank classes have like a 2-minute cooldown rotation. So if you walk in, you pull like 2 or 3 big mobs, you can kind of, oh crap, pop everything and live through it, right? That means that big pull there should probably be followed by 1 or maybe 2 smaller pulls. That way your cooldowns come back and you're a little bit stouter, and your DPS kind of also follow the same rotation. So as you're making those big pulls, they can utilize their cooldowns to take out a lot of those enemies. And that's just going to help everything kind of move smoother. And we're going to talk a little bit more about communication later. The last thing is know how the affixes will affect your pulls, right? The last thing you want to do is walk in there on necrotic week and start pulling 6 packs of little ads, because last week when it was tyrannical, those ads really didn't do anything, and now they're fortified and they're giving you necrotic and they're just going to like wreck your face. So know how the affixes are going to affect those pulls and be prepared to go through and set up different pathing on Mythic Dungeon tools depending on the affix. It's very, very important to know that, well, I can't pull all 20 of these little ads because it's an explosive week and they're all going to spawn orbs. And there's no way that I can expect my DPS to go out there and to pick up all those orbs just because I can live through the hits of the mobs. You want to make sure you're tracking those little nuanced things, because that is going to make you a phenomenally better tank. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is communication. This is tip number 5. Communicate with your team. All right. As the tank, the one person that you need to be talking to nearly constantly should be your healer. You're going to want to coordinate cooldowns with them. Hey, I just popped Vampiric. I'm probably good for the next 10 seconds. Don't hit me with wings. Save it. I'm going to need it later. How's your mana looking? Am I line of sighting you? Can you hit me around these stairs? Can you hit me around this rock? I'm about to line of sight around this rock. You're not going to be able to heal me. Constant communication. You want to be talking and working with them. over time, the communication may lessen just because you don't need it. You kind of get inside each other's heads, or you learn how you're going to pull things. They get comfortable with how you're going to pull things. That's fine. That's great. But especially in the early days and even later on, just, you get in that rhythm, it's not going to be a bad thing to be talking all the time. Be constantly communicating, especially with your healer. Also, talk over the cooldowns with your DPS. Things like stuns, shrouds, defensives. Dude, I need help. Cool. Demon Hunter comes in, drops darkness for you. Now you effectively have a defensive cooldown from one of your DPS as well. That constant communication allows your team to make some really, really clutch plays. But if you're not constantly talking, I have this available, I could do this, or I could do this, those things aren't going to happen. So make sure you're constantly communicating. Also, if they don't have things like method dungeon tools, or even if they do, it does look a little different from time to time when you're in the dungeon, let them know your pathing plans. Don't be afraid to take suggestions, right? Everybody's going to have seen these dungeons done a little bit differently. Maybe they have a little bit different way of pulling something. Maybe like, hey man, try and pull this pack or this pack. Hey, try and line a sight back here. Everybody's going to have seen something a little bit different. Don't be afraid to talk it over with your DPS and, adjust as necessary. Maybe you want to just try your path. Hey, you're the tank, it's kind of your run. You set the pace. But if it doesn't work, it's also kind of your run and it's kind of your fault. So don't be afraid to take the suggestions on board, rework them in the method dungeon tools with those DPS or with those other guys. You guys should all be a team. You should be working together. You should be constantly communicating because everyone wants the same goal, right? Push bigger keys, get bigger loots, more perps, more epics. That's the dream, right? So tip number 6 is taken directly from one of my favorite streamers, Preach Gaming. And it is create death balls. If you ever watch his content, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I felt this was kind of too important to leave out of this video. And it's something that I do, and I get a lot of comments and compliments about it. And even if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sure you've seen it at least once or twice. Creating death balls is using things like line of sights, grips, and cooldowns to stack up adds. So what do I mean? You walk into an area, it's kind of an open area, right? There's 2 or 3 packs with some casters in it. If you taunt one of those packs, the melee mobs will run to you, but those casters are going to stand there and cast. There's 2 ways to get them to move, 3 ways technically to get them to move. You can grip them, you can interrupt them, or you can line of sight them. So if you taunt an ad in that pack and then force the line of sight, you can get all those mobs to come up and kind of stack up on each other. That's a death ball. When you get a big cluster of ads basically all stacked up in like one little tiny area, that allows your demon hunters to go nuts with I-beam, cleave gets off the charts. And what we're talking about right now is kind of something we're going to lead into with the next tip. But it's really going to help push the damage of the group. The tank can very, very easily affect the damage of the group, and this is a great way is by creating those death balls. Your ultimate goal here is to maximize the DPS of the group so that you can get those keys done a little quicker. So that leads us into tip number 7, which is going to be create opportunities for your group to succeed. All right. Now, we're talking about that a little bit with creating the death balls, and I wanted to make sure I, put a pin in that one because it's a big one. What we're talking about now is those complicated skips that you saw your favorite streamer do or you saw in the MDI once, you want to try it. Those might not always be the best idea, especially if you're a little bit newer group or you got some newer players, or maybe you've got some pugs in there to where you lack a little bit of coordination. You don't have voice comms to make on the fly calls. Try and avoid those really complicated skips or things that haven't maybe been practiced, because more often than not, they're not going to go as well as they looked in the MDI. Those guys have hours and hours and hours of practice running those different skips and making those strats work. When you jump into a group with your friends for the first time, you might not pull it off, and then it's just going to cost a huge amount of time. So try and create opportunities for your group to succeed by using clear, precise pulls that don't require the craziness of invis here, shroud here, whatever it is. Another big thing that I see a lot, and I wanted to bring this one up, is try pulling mobs into safe zones. You'll see a lot of guys that'll pull a pack, right? Tank pulls a pack, grips it all up, but you've got 2 packs on either side of you that are standing super close, right? Now, the tank didn't pull it, but I guarantee it, before the pull is over, one of your DPS is going to get feared, or somebody's going to, let a stray arrow go, or a chain lightning is going to get a little bit loose. One of those is going to get pulled, and then the tank gets mad about it. But the tank is the one that determines how those ads are pulled. You could very, very easily do things like taunt one ad and then Gorfine's Grasp, line of sight pulled. You've got the chains for a Demon Hunter. There's a lot of options for how you can get those ads back to where you want them to be, and ideally create some separation when you don't want all those different mobs pulled. A lot of times, a lot of wipes are going to be caused by 1 or 2 extra packs being pulled due to a fear or something like that. As the tank, you have the opportunity to create safe zones for your DPS to just go ham, right? You'll see it a lot to where people will run in, and then you're standing on this little tiny mob pack, and damage is low in the group, so you're there forever, and you're like, well, what's going on? Well, I can't use my AoE because we're surrounded by enemies, and if I pull them, you're going to scream at me. Pull them back, move those mobs, and create opportunities for your group to succeed by making those little safe zones for them, all right? You have the opportunity to create safe zones and help your group succeed, maximize DPS for the group, and help push those keys just that much faster. All right, now the run is over. Everybody's got their perps. Maybe somebody got a mount. Everybody's happy. Now it's time for one of the most important tips I can give you. Tip number 8, talk about what happened when it's over, okay? As you ran through that dungeon, everybody saw something a little bit different. Everybody probably noticed 1 or 2 little things that you might have missed. It is hugely important to open method dungeon tools back up after a run and be like, all right, what did we see? How can we improve that? I don't understand. I pulled this and this, and I pulled this and this, and I was pulling fairly quickly, and it just seems like we weren't getting it done, yada, yada. And then when your DPS might pipe up and be like, hey, man, well, this happened, and this happened, and this is kind of what I was seeing. And you can start to adjust and tweak. And then maybe if if you're going to be running with the same group because you were talking with those friends or guild mates and you put your own little Mythic Plus team together, you can start creating some of those skips. Well, what if we were able to skip this pack and pull these guys? Because they're a lot easier. They don't do nearly the damage, and we can just cleave the hell out of them. And you can start to kind of tweak your own strats and your own runs. And that's going to help you out a lot. But it keeps hitting on that communication topic, right? Tip number 8, talk about it when it's over, which leads right back to tip 5, communicate with your team, right? This is all playing in together. This is just one big tip, right? Big tip. So tip number 8, talk about it when it's over. Open that method dungeon tools back up. Start tweaking those runs and those pull paths and figuring out how you can improve and knock down on some of that time. All right, guys. And then I want to finish off by saying every dungeon is going to make us better, right? And you have to believe that every MDI team out there practiced for hours and hours to make those really cool pulls and skips work. You should not expect to get it the first time. You're going to probably need some practice. Scuffing a key is not the end of the world. You're still going to get a little loot, and ideally, you learn something from it. But thanks for listening, everyone, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions or comments, post them in the comments section below. Ask me on Twitter or on my live stream. Links in the description below. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that sub button. It does help out a lot, guys. Until next time, later, y'all.